Welcome back to Occult Archives. You know, the place we go to, unearth those hidden stories, the myths, the legends, the stuff behind some of history's most, let's say, notorious books.
The books that some people would rather just stay shut.
Exactly. The ones that send shivers down your spine. From those grimoires, the ones with all the spells and secrets, to those really ancient texts, the ones that are, well, a little too cryptic for comfort.
The kind of books that make you wonder if some knowledge is just too dangerous to handle.
Right. Like, maybe some doors are better left unopened. But that's not really our style, is it?
Not at all. In fact, today we're diving headfirst into a book that, well, it really stirred things up back in 1919.
Freemasonry and Catholicism, right? By Max Heindel.
That's the one. And what Heindel presents isn't just some historical rivalry. It's, it's like a cosmic showdown.
For the soul of humanity, no less. So for our listeners out there, the ones who like their knowledge potent like a shot of espresso, this deep dive is for you. No beating around the bush, just straight to the core of Heindel's argument.
Precisely. We're going to sift through Freemasonry and Catholicism and pull out the really juicy bits, the insights that'll make you go, aha.
So picture it, 1919. The world's still reeling from the Great War. And here comes Max Heindel, a Rosicrucian. Now, he wasn't a Freemason himself.
But he definitely had a soft spot for their ideas.
Oh, yeah. He really admired their principles. But when it came to Catholicism...
Let's just say he wasn't shy about his critique.
Not at all. He even admits there might be a bit of bias in his view, which I think adds a layer of, honesty to his work.
Absolutely. It invites the reader to engage critically, to weigh the evidence.
Which is what we encourage here at Occult Archives. Always question, always explore.
Right. So Heindel's aim isn't really to play peacemaker between these two groups. He wants to dig deeper, to uncover what he sees as the fundamental cosmic roots of their conflict.
And this is where things get really interesting. Because Heindel's not just talking about, earthly institutions clashing.
He's talking about different approaches to spiritual development, different methods of, evolving the human soul.
And he takes us way back to the very beginning to understand this cosmic conflict. So where does he start?
He starts with what he calls the Saturn period.
The Saturn period. Okay, paint me a picture.
Imagine a world of pure darkness. No light, just intense, pervasive heat.
It sounds cozy.
Well, humanity at this point is, it's in its infancy, almost mineral-like.
Mineral-like, so not exactly running around building pyramids.
Not quite. But the key here is the state of unity. There's no separation, everything's one, and the highest being, the most evolved, is what Heindel calls the Father.
The Father. So this is like the first stage of cosmic evolution.
Exactly. It's all about potential, laying the groundwork, the Father, the heat. It's all a primal energy source.
Okay, so from this primordial soup, what happens next?
We move on to the Sun period. Things start to get a bit more lively. Air comes into the picture, mixing with that primal heat.
So now we have two elements interacting.
Yes. And this interaction is critical because suddenly that invisible fire, that raw energy, bursts into flame. It becomes light. Let there be light. And who's the big player in this era? The Sun.
The Sun, like a counterpart to the Father.
Exactly. Heindel sees the Sun as the highest initiate of this period. He's like a manifestation of the Father's hidden fire.
And what about unity? Is everything still one big happy family?
For now, yes. Even with the emergence of distinct elements and beings, the underlying unity remains.
Right, so we got darkness, heat, then light. What's next in this cosmic drama?
Well, things take a bit of a turn with the Moon period. This is where things start to get complicated.
Uh-oh, what happens?
Enter cold space. And with it, moisture. Now, the elements aren't playing so nice anymore.
A cosmic battle royale.
In a way, yes. The fire wants to evaporate the water, but the water condenses and pushes back. It's an ongoing struggle.
And who's in charge of this cosmic tug of war?
The highest initiate of the Moon period is Jehovah, also known as the Holy Spirit.
So this is where things start to get interesting, right? This is where we start to see the seeds of this conflict between Freemasonry and Catholicism.
That's right. And this conflict really heats up, so to speak, with the rebellion of the Lucifer Spirits.
The Lucifer Spirits. Okay, fill me in.
These spirits, they had a strong affinity for fire. They loved it.
Fire as knowledge, as enlightenment.
Exactly. But Jehovah, he wanted them to create watery forms.
And they were like, nah, we're good.
Pretty much. They weren't into it. So they ended up on Mars with Samizel is their kind of ambassador.
Oh, Jehovah stayed on Earth, right?
Yeah.
With Gabriel as his representative.
You got it. And this cosmic split, this division between the Lucifer spirits and Jehovah is, according to Heindel, the root of the conflict we see playing out on Earth between Freemasonry and Catholicism.
So how does this cosmic drama translate to earthly institutions?
Mhm.
What's the connection between these rebellious spirits and Freemasonry?
Well, Heindel argues that Freemasonry, at its core, is an attempt by the Lucifer spirits, these hierarchs of fire, to bring light to humanity.
Light as in knowledge, awareness.
Precisely. They want to free the spirit, the light that's trapped within matter, to help us see and understand for ourselves.
So they're like the cosmic liberators of the mind.
You could say that, but then you have Catholicism, which Heindel sees as an activity of the hierarchs of water.
Okay, so they're on the opposite team.
Right. And they're using, symbolically speaking, holy water to, well, kind of dampen that quest for knowledge. They're all about faith in Jehovah, in divine authority.
So it's like a battle between reason and faith, between individual exploration and divine revelation.
That's a good way to put it. And Heindel takes this cosmic battle even further into the very process of conception and birth.
Whoa, okay, we're going deep here.
He says that Jehovah, through Gabriel, is the one who initiates the physical form of the fetus. It happens around the time of the Cancer astrological influence, which is ruled by the moon.
Makes sense. Cancer, the moon, all about nurturing creation.
Right. But then, about 4 months later, when the fetus is under the influence of Scorpio...
Scorpio, the 8th house, the house of death and transformation.
Exactly. That's when Samuel steps in.
The Luciferian representative. What's he
Yeah.
doing there?
He's bringing in the spark of individual spirit, the fire.
So both sides are involved in creating a human being.
It's a collaboration of sorts, and at this point, the silver cord is formed.
The silver cord, the connection between the physical body and the higher self.
Yes. And this is when the spirit effectively dies to the higher worlds in order to enter the physical.
It's like a little death and rebirth already happening before we're even born.
Precisely. A journey from the spiritual realm to the material. And then, about 5 months after this spiritual quickening, as the sun moves from watery Pisces into fiery Aries.
Aries ruled by Mars, the planet of action, energy.
Right. Samuel uses that Martian energy to, well, kickstart the birth process.
It's like a cosmic push out of the womb and into the world.
You could say that. And once we're here, Heindel outlines 3 possible paths symbolized by the fire signs: Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius.
Okay, so different ways to navigate this earthly experience.
Yes. And he sees the Sagittarius path, the path of the seeker, the philosopher, as leading to the archetype of being wise as serpents.
Interesting, because usually the serpent in the Garden of Eden isn't exactly seen as a symbol of wisdom.
Right. But Heindel is challenging that traditional interpretation. He sees the serpent as a representative of knowledge, of enlightenment, and this path, according to Heindel, can lead to initiation into what he calls mystic masonry.
Mystic Masonry. So like a secret society of those who are seeking the light.
Something like that. The Freemason, as he calls them, the children of light.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking about a really ancient cosmic battle playing out here. But how does Heindel connect all this to the actual legends and stories of Freemasonry and Catholicism?
He does that by exploring what he calls symbolic legends. He starts with the biblical creation story, but he gives it a bit of an esoteric twist.
Okay, so like a secret meaning behind the familiar story.
Exactly. He talks about the original bisexual Adam, the separation into male and female to develop the brain and the larynx, the ability to think and speak. And then, of course, there's the tree of knowledge.
Right, forbidden fruit, all that.
But Heindel doesn't see it as simply about disobedience. He interprets it as representing the creative force itself, the power of procreation.
So eating the fruit is like engaging in the act of creation.
Exactly. And this act, it comes with consequences. Mortality, pain, the separation from the divine realms. But he also points out that even Christ acknowledged the wisdom of the serpent.
Be wise as serpents, harmless as doves.
That's the one. So Heindel is saying, look, the serpent is not just evil, it also represents knowledge, a different kind of wisdom.
Interesting. And how does he tie this back to the Lucifer spirits?
He connects the serpent directly to them and to the astrological sign of Scorpio. He even mentions that the initiates of these Lucifer spirits, even back in ancient Egypt, they wore the UREUS, the serpent emblem, on their foreheads.
As a symbol of wisdom, not evil.
Exactly. He's turning that traditional interpretation on its head.
So what about those coats of skin mentioned in the Bible? Is that punishment for eating the fruit.
Heindel sees it differently. He says the coats of skin represent the physical body itself, the result of humanity's use of the creative force, which led to separation from the divine.
So it's not so much a punishment as a consequence of our actions.
Right. A natural outcome of descending into the material world.
Okay, so that's the biblical version
Yeah.
with Heindel's esoteric spin on it. What about the Masonic legend? How does that differ?
Well, in the Masonic legend, Jehovah creates Eve, but Samael unites with her first, before Jehovah intervenes. And from this union, Cain is born.
Cain, the son of a widow, right? Because technically Eve didn't have a husband at that point.
Exactly. And Cain, he's different. He's described as having this semi-divine nature, this drive for action, this skepticism. He believes in works, in doing, not just faith.
Sounds like a bit of a rebel.
He is. And then Jehovah creates Adam, and from them comes Abel.
Abel, the more passive, obedient son.
Right. He represents the more, let's say, traditional human progeny, reliant on Jehovah, living by faith.
So we have these two sons representing two different lineages, two different approaches to life.
And according to Heindel, this is where the ongoing tension really starts.
Between the descendants of Cain and Seth, right?
Yes. Yes. The temporal rulers versus the priesthood, the focus on worldly success versus spiritual guidance. It's a battle that continues to this day.
And how does Solomon's temple fit into all of this?
Well, in the Masonic legend, Solomon, who is a descendant of Seth, has this vision of building a magnificent temple.
A symbol of spiritual aspiration.
Exactly, but to actually build it, he needs someone with practical skills, a master craftsman. And that's where Hiram Abiff comes in.
Hiram Abiff, also a son of a widow, but descended from Cain, right?
That's right. He represents the arts and crafts, the ability to create in the material world.
So we have this interesting collaboration between the spiritual vision of Solomon and the practical skills of Hiram Abiff.
But there's also tension, because Hiram Abiff, with his Cainite lineage, he has this innate desire to create, to originate. He's not content with just following orders.
He wants to leave his own mark on the world.
Exactly. And this leads to the creation of the molten sea.
The molten sea. Now, that's a name that conjures up some powerful imagery. What was it exactly?
Well, in the Bible, it's just mentioned briefly as a large basin for the priests to use, but in the Masonic legend, it's much more than that. It's a grand laver for purification.
It's a symbol of cleansing, of spiritual renewal.
Yes. But the key difference is that in the Masonic legend, only Hiram Abiff knows the formula for creating this molten sea.
So it's not just a vessel, it's the substance itself that's important.
Exactly. And Heindel suggests that if Hiram had succeeded in creating it, it would have elevated him to a status beyond ordinary humanity.
So it's almost like an alchemical experiment, a quest for transformation.
Precisely. And Heindel connects this back to Samael's promise to Eve in the Garden of Eden. "Ye shall be as gods." He sees Hiram as trying to fulfill that promise, to reclaim that lost power.
But the sons of Cain were excluded from the temple, right? Just like Cain was banished from Eden.
That's right. And Hiram, with the molten sea, he's trying to change that. He wants to rend the veil, to bridge the gap between humanity and the divine.
So how did he go about creating this molten sea?
He collected all the metals ever worked by the sons of Cain, pulverized them, and used alchemical processes to extract their essence.
It sounds like he's trying to create a kind of philosopher's stone.
In a way, yes. He wanted to create a sea of glass that would bestow perpetual youth and wisdom, a way to connect directly with higher beings.
It's a pretty ambitious goal, but it sounds like it doesn't go quite as planned.
Unfortunately, no, there's a conspiracy afoot.
A conspiracy. Who's behind it?
Some of the less skilled craftsmen, the ones who couldn't be initiated into the higher mysteries, they were jealous of Hiram's knowledge and power.
And they sabotaged him.
Yes. They poured water into the mold, knowing that Hiram was a master of fire, not water.
Water, the element of the sons of Seth. It's like a symbolic attack on Hiram's entire lineage.
Exactly. And Heindel even hints that Solomon might have been complicit in this out of jealousy over the Queen of Sheba's admiration for Hiram.
Wow, so it's a story of ambition, betrayal, and cosmic forces at play. So what happens next?
Hiram realizes what's happening, but it's too late. He pulls the plugs, causing a huge explosion, a clash of fire and water.
Sounds chaotic.
It is. But then, remembering the ancient call of Tubal-Cain, the first smith, Hiram leaps into the molten sea.
He jumps into the fire. Why would he do that?
It's an act of faith. He's trusting in his lineage and the power of fire to transform him.
So what happens to him? Does he die?
He goes on a mystical journey to the center of the earth.
To the center of the earth. Okay, we're definitely in the realm of myth and legend now.
We are. And at the center of the earth, he meets Cain.
The first son of Cain. And what does Cain tell him?
He gives him instructions on how to harmonize fire and water, how to bridge the gap between these two opposing forces. He gives him a new hammer in the shape of a cross and a new word of power.
A new hammer, a new word. It's like he's being given new tools, a new way of understanding the world.
Exactly. And Cain prophesies that Hiram's work is not yet done, that he will be reborn, and that one greater than him will come, the Lion of Judah, who will baptize humanity with both water and spirit.
So a unification of the two paths, the two lineages.
Yes. And this Lion of Judah will establish a new city, a new temple, made of the sea of glass, a place of peace and harmony.
So it's a vision of a future where the conflict between fire and water is finally resolved.
Exactly. And this new world will be ruled by the order of Melchizedek, the king and priest, a symbol of spiritual and temporal power united.
And what about Hiram? What happens to him after his meeting with Cain?
He's reborn as Lazarus, the widow's son of Nain, who is raised from the dead by Christ, the Lion of Judah.
So it's like a resurrection, a symbolic initiation.
Exactly. And after his rebirth, he discovers the cross-shaped hammer and a disc inscribed with a rose. These become symbols of his transformation.
And he takes on a new identity, right?
Yes, he becomes Christian Rosicrucian, the legendary founder of the Rosicrucian order.
The Rosicrucians, the seekers of the philosopher's stone, the white stone.
Exactly. So, in a way, Hiram's journey becomes a blueprint for the Rosicrucian path, the path of spiritual alchemy, of inner transformation.
Wow, it's a really intricate and symbolic story. And it shows how Heindel weaves together these different traditions, these different threads of thought, into a grand cosmic narrative.
It's an ambitious undertaking, and it gives us a lot to think about, especially the way he uses these ancient stories to explore the deeper meaning of this conflict between Freemasonry and Catholicism.
So for our listeners who are maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by all this cosmic history and symbolism, what are the key takeaways from Heindel's work?
Well, I think the most important thing is the recognition that this conflict is not just about earthly institutions. It's about different evolutionary paths, different approaches to spiritual development.
The path of fire versus the path of water. Reason versus faith. Action versus contemplation.
Exactly. And while these paths might seem opposed, Heindel ultimately points towards a future of unification, a future where these seemingly contradictory forces can be harmonized.
A future where the sons of Cain and the sons of Seth can finally work together to build a new world.
Precisely. A world where the white stone, the philosopher's stone, the symbol of spiritual perfection, can finally be achieved.
It's a powerful vision. And it leaves us with a lot to ponder, doesn't it? How do these ancient forces, these archetypal entities, play out in our own lives, in our own societies? Are we still caught in this cosmic battle?
That's a question for each of us to consider. And I think exploring the symbolism of the molten sea, the figure of Melchizedek, the king and priest, can offer us some valuable insights.
As always, the journey of discovery continues. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Freemasonry and Catholicism by Max Heindel. We'll see you next time on Occult Archives, where we'll continue to explore the hidden stories behind history's most fascinating and perhaps most feared books.
Until then, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep the fire of curiosity burning bright.